All right, can everybody see this? All right, hopefully people on YouTube are in the right place. I may send you a new link. Yep, we're gonna do a new link here. If you need YouTube, go to this one, okay? Okay, great. So without further ado, I am very, very honored to have wonderful guests today. We have worked together before, and I'm always delighted to be online with them. And thank you so much for waking up early, especially Adam. It's 5 a.m. Thank you for joining us so early. And again, we want to cover a great topic today about personal statements, essays, but we want to answer questions, and we will have time at the end for questions. But if you already know, like, I have this really important question that I want to ask, go ahead and start typing things in the Q&A box so that we can kind of hopefully fold them into our presentation a little bit, but also make sure that we consolidate and get to them at the end. And so I'm going to go ahead and have my guests introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Very happy to be with you all. And my name is Adam Sapp. I'm the Director of Admission at Pomona College. And then quickly, do we want to introduce Lisa and Chandra real quick before I start?
They can introduce themselves when they introduce their institutions
Sure.
as well.
Okay. We'll keep going with Pomona. I only have a few minutes and I want to do the highlights. I think this slide covers it all. It's a bit of a combination of a few different slides because I wanted to get in a lot of information. Pomona College is located in Southern California. We're 35 miles east of Los Angeles. And the location of Pomona is in Los Angeles County. We're on the east side. As you may know, LA is the second largest city in the United States, home to about 10 million people within the county, about 4 million people within the city of Los Angeles. But Pomona is much smaller, about 1,650 students at Pomona, 48 different majors. And we're one of the oldest institutions in California, the founder of the Claremont Colleges. So you may have heard of Claremont McKenna College, Harvey Mudd College, Pitzer College, and Scripps College. Together with Pomona, we make up the Claremont Consortium. The concept is very simple. You attend one school, but you can take classes at all 5. You live at one school, but you can participate in extracurricular activities at all 5. Pomona is the largest of the Claremont colleges. We have one of the nation's highest graduation rates, lots of students doing internships, both in Los Angeles, in the United States, and abroad, and many students pursuing research in all areas, whether that's the humanities and the social sciences, or of course the natural sciences, or interdisciplinary fields. We're an incredibly diverse place. This year's class was about 14% international students. We normally range between 12 and 13% international students from all around the world. We're always happy to have lots of different perspectives on campus, lots of different backgrounds on campus. And we are a place that really values creativity and engagement and scholarship, all inside of a liberal arts curriculum where students are learning broadly. I know my colleagues here, we all share so many of the same values, which is why we're together today. So you may hear some recurring themes, but I just wanted to start us off there with a little bit about Pomona. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. And I'll end with that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Shen. I am an senior assistant dean at Swarthmore College, and I'm also the director of international recruitment here at Swarthmore. So Swarthmore College is located in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Philadelphia. Now, LA is the second largest city. Philadelphia is the 6th largest city. And I say that in US terms, not necessarily in Chinese or South Korean or really anywhere else in the world's terms. So we have a train station right at the base of campus. You can see the train actually right here. And it'll take students, it'll take community members right into Philadelphia. So we have the benefit of being a suburban campus while also having access to a large city. Now, Swarthmore College is also a liberal arts college, but we are unique in that we also have an engineering major. Our engineering major is housed fully in-house. You aren't required to go off campus to other colleges or anything to take classes. You take your classes fully at Swarthmore and you'll get your degree at Swarthmore as well. And some fun things about Swarthmore, about 14% of our student body is international. That does include undocumented students who live in the US, but we try our best, we try really hard to bring a diverse group of students on campus. And for us, diversity also includes our international student population. And we have about 60% of our students do research while they're at Swarthmore. So since we're a liberal arts college, we are undergraduate only. So all of our research opportunities are fully for our undergraduate students. So our faculty members are super into having undergrads, having their students work in their labs or on their research projects with them. And one last thing that I will say is that Swarthmore is a part of the Tri-College Consortium with Haverford and Bryn Mawr colleges. So though we are a small school, we are about 1,600 students, you have access to Bryn Mawr and Haverford campuses as well as their classes if you feel like you want to expand your wings a little bit more. But I want to make sure that we have time to talk about the topic at hand. So I'm going to move it on to Wesleyan.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good zip code, area code, and whatever time zone you're in. I'm Chandra Jostakoven. I'm the Director of Admission at Wesleyan University, and it's just a pleasure to swim anchor with this relay team. So just to give you a primer on Wesleyan, we are located in Middletown, Connecticut. So unlike my peers who are located in a major city or near a major city, we are aptly named Middletown because we're smack dab in the middle between New York City and Boston, about 2.5 hours each way. Middletown is a small city of 60,000. I recognize in international standards, that's probably more like a small village for you. So please know that in Middletown, we do have a vibrant community that's going to be very supportive of your transition and success at Wesleyan. So easy access to Wesleyan, both as you step onto campus and as you're looking to take on internships, go home for the summer, or visit others. So we were founded in 1831 as a progressive approach to liberal arts and sciences education. And so we were one of the first to teach natural sciences, modern language, and also contemporary literature. Additionally, we're one of the first institutions in the Northeast to be co-ed and actively recruiting students in the 1950s and 60s that had not been traditionally well represented in higher education. And so that commitment and these efforts are evident if you look at our student body as well as our faculty and staff. Our community reflects this commitment to diversity. And so when we're talking about the diversity, we have 13% of our students are non-US passport holders. About 18% of our students actually hail from beyond the United States. And we have an 8-to-1 student faculty ratio. We do have university in our name, but we function more like a large liberal arts college with the benefits of a university. So we offer graduate degrees in the natural sciences. We have a world-renowned ethnomusicology program for students to take advantage of. But please know that at Wesleyan, you get the best of both worlds because of the focus on the undergraduate experience with 3,000 undergrads. But we do have the resources that come with a university, including $25 million of Natural Science Foundation research funds that goes to many of our undergraduate students, not unheard of for our undergraduate students to engage in research, even their first year. And one thing that distinguishes Wesleyan, as I mentioned, the progressive approach to liberal arts and sciences education, unlike perhaps your high school experience when you've been told what to take, at Wesleyan, we subscribe to what's called an open curriculum. So we empower students to direct your own educational path and with the support of our highly structured advising system. And so students can pursue different passions and interests. Many of our students double major, some triple major. I share this not to stress you out, but rather to illustrate the flexibility of being able to take a variety of different courses and not having to particularly choose. It's also a different feeling in the classroom when you're taking a class because you want to take that class rather than it's a required class. And our faculty teach one less course than their peers do, so that they do have more time for that advising. Our students go to all different areas of industry, all different areas of graduate programs as well, fabulous graduation as well as placement rates. And our students and our alums are lifelong learners. And so one of the benefits, or one of the treats of really chatting with many of our alums, is that they're not necessarily on this linear path, but a very circuitous and interesting path of where they are today. And so many of our alums aren't actually pursuing the major or in a career that is related to their major, but doing something very different. And that's just one of the benefits of a liberal arts education, whether it's at Wesleyan, Swarthmore, or Pomona. So I'm going to end there so we can delve into the essay part and provide pearls of wisdom as you're thinking about the personal statement and personal essay.
All right, thank you both. And I will take it from here, and we'll start with essay and the essay topic of today. This is a broad topic. We intentionally chose this topic because we felt it's about the right time for many of you seniors who are working on writing and working on essays. It's an important topic because, as you're going to learn about today, there's a whole lot to know about essays and how to write them and how to think about them, and the role that they play in the application process. And there seems to be an endless amount of curiosity amongst high school students and parents and counselors about how to write a good essay and the things to avoid. And we're going to cover all of those topics today. I want to start with the bigger picture, which is really explaining about why the essay matters. And quite simply, because it's part of something bigger. The application itself is very important. The application itself is made up of many very important components, and the essay is one of those. And that is because, like many liberal arts institutions and many highly selective institutions, Wesleyan, Pomona, and Swarthmore all practice whole person or holistic review, which means that we look at many, many different things when we are reading an application. It's a multi-factor review. So we're really looking to go beyond testing and metrics. We know you're more than a number or a GPA, and we think about that when we are reviewing your applications. It doesn't mean that if you submit testing, all of us are test optional, or if you have a GPA, or if there are what we would call sort of numbers or numerics in your file, that we ignore them. I mean, we do want to, look at them when they're present, but we certainly care about a lot more than that. And so your recommendations, essays, transcripts, extracurricular activities, all of these things, we kind of weave them together to get a picture of who you are. But it's in your essays that we really are able to get a perspective that is first and foremost you, and originally you. And that's very, very important. Our review is very what we call context-based. That is a word that lots of US institutions that use holistic review will use. Context is an important part of our work because we are trying to understand your background and your family situation, your lived experience and your life experiences. For many of you, that's going to include maybe time in a particular family with family dynamics, time in a particular school and an educational context, maybe a time in a community or two or three if you have lived in several places. Maybe English is not your first language, it's your second or third or maybe fourth language. The way that you communicate, the way that you think about the world, all of those things are part of our contextual review, which is critical to our work. And, you know, honestly, the thing that I think, and this really speaks to essays particularly, we're also looking for you to have a voice in the application. And essays really help you to clarify and give you a platform to speak directly to admissions officers and tell us what's on your mind. What do you think about? What are you passionate about? What are you interested in? And that allows you to really put forward an authentic version of yourself. We want the real you. We're not asking you to answer the essays using some kind of formula or draft an essay that you think we want to hear. We want to hear what you want to tell us. And it is a little bit of a common refrain amongst admissions officers. I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard someone say this, but it is true that at the end of the day, many of us are just trying to find what makes you passionate, what makes you interesting, what makes you get up in the morning as a student and motivates you to learn and to engage. And all of this comes together to really help us understand your fit. And institutional fit is a broad concept, but we're really talking about the ways in which your educational needs, your social needs, your career and outcome goals, all of those things that are of value to you, fit together with what an institution offers and can provide and is really good at when it comes to supporting particular students. In the next slide, we'll also talk a little bit about the different kinds of applications. And there are two that we accept, the coalition application and the common application. The common app has 7 different prompts for you to choose from when it comes to the essay. You also have an essay topic that is the topic of your choice. So both platforms offer a kind of free form topic if you want to make one up. But there are also prompts that can help guide your writing. And prompts can be very helpful. Prompts can give your writing structure. They can give you something to respond to. They can provoke thinking and reflection in a really helpful way. But there's no penalty if you choose your own topic. You certainly can do that. But it is something just to sort of consider that if you choose one of the prompts, that may be one way to anchor some of your writing and pre-writing. There are some differences. The common application is an application platform itself, and you'll have recommendations that come through, and you'll have your essays and your application that come through, and all of that is linked with our systems so that we can download your application when complete. The coalition works very similarly. We can download all that information. The coalition does have some additional support platforms and what's called a locker for you to store information inside of, and a collaboration space. So there's a few additional features with the coalition website, but the applications from coalition and common application, we treat them the same. We don't prefer one application over the other. And we know both of them provide essay prompts that give us a window into who you are and help us do our jobs really, really well. So with that, we'll move on to the next few slides, and I'll let Lisa take over.
Thanks, Adam. So in the last slide, you saw that the Common app had 7 prompts and the Coalition app has 5 prompts. And those are a lot of choices. So it's going to be hard. It's going to take some time to decide which prompt works for you. So the biggest piece of advice for choosing a prompt is to think about what you want to highlight about yourself. Now I'm probably going to go out of order on these bullet points, but your essay is supposed to be about you as a student. It's not supposed to be about your grandmother. It's not supposed to be about your father. It's about you. So what do you want to tell us as admissions officers? What do you want to tell your reader about yourself? So thinking about a time you learned about yourself. So, a little bit of a cliche thing is, climbing the mountain and then, overcoming that hardship or anything like that. So, you could think in those lines, but you could be a little bit more creative and think about how you have kind of seen new things about yourself, kind of how your perspective has changed maybe. So really be reflective about the whys and hows of of what you're writing about rather than the what. You don't have to be super unique. You don't have to think of a topic that is like, oh, I'm going to be the only one who talks about this, because that is not the priority for the essay. The essay is really to tell us about you and your motivation behind the things that you do. So what do you love to talk about? What are some things that are really important about you? What are some lessons that you've learned? And we recognize that the average college applicant is 17 years old. So maybe you haven't had as many life lessons as, an admissions officer who is not 17 years old. And we're certainly not expecting you to, be a full, complete, I learned the importance of X, Y, or Z. But as a 17-year-old, you certainly learned something about yourself. And so we really want the essay to be where you highlight that and where you kind of show us your motivation. And by show us your motivation, I don't mean, and this is why I want to be a doctor, but just show us your motivation of why you do the things that you do, or, what's important to you and what do you love. So those are really kind of some key tips, oh my gosh, of how to choose a prompt with all of those different choices that you have available for the main essay. Whew, it's early in the morning. All right, and then there is usually a second essay. Some schools require them, some schools it's optional. Different schools for their application have different things, but if there is a school-specific essay, that may require a little bit of a different approach. So you're still reflecting on all of the things that you reflected on for your main essay, a time you've learned about yourself, things that you love, creativity, what's important, all of those things. But you are also thinking about the school that you are applying to. So what do they value at that school? How do you see yourself fitting into the community there? And what unique perspectives, or what perspective just in general, are you bringing to the campus? And so this will require a little bit more research on the institution. You might want to keep a journal, or, keep some sort of organizational tool to help you really think about what it is that makes this college where you want to apply. And that's not just academic things, that could be non-academic things as well. And so really thinking about your community, really thinking about how you might fit in that community, doing virtual tours or doing virtual activities to kind of get to know the school that you're applying to will really help you with writing these school-specific essays, because those will be the places where you can get key things that maybe you won't be able to find on our websites, or, like anecdotes that current students have that are pretty unique to their experience. And so really, when you're writing these essays, it might take a lot of notes, it might take some research, but these things really do help, and they pay off, because your essay is really the one place where you have complete control over your narrative. So you have the power there to tell us what you want us to hear, or what you want us to read, essentially. So definitely take some time to think about what you want to write for your main essay, and to think about these school-specific essays, because you don't want a fantastic main essay and then your school-specific essay is just, a stream of consciousness. You just write it out and submit it. Both essays will require a little bit of thought and a little bit of reflection.
Right. Thanks, Lisa, for teeing it up so well, and such a great segue to talk about organization. So how do you start this process? And we recognize that the essay is probably the hardest part of the application, because everything is pretty much set. You have your transcript, your letters of recommendation are being written. Now it's time for you to sit down and think about various topics, and start the writing process. So how does one go about doing that? Well, like many of your other subjects, you probably have tactics and skills, or strategies rather, for which you're jotting down notes, you're thinking about themes, you have, whether it is Trello or Google Docs, whatever the case might be, to keep these thoughts organized. And I would also recommend, whether you use a particular theme or an idea, to hold on to that, because that always comes in handy later on when you're thinking about perhaps scholarship essays. Some of our institutions will ask particular questions as it relates to merit scholarships or specific scholarships outside of our institutions. So please keep that in mind. But one other way to, and Lisa touched upon this in terms of prioritization and thinking about strategy of, it can be overwhelming, particularly as you're looking at all the different institutions, the essays that we're asking. So start off with perhaps whether it's the coalition application or the common application or the state specific or the school specific application, and go from there. And I would also recommend that you follow through with the required essays and prompts before you delve into the optional, because we really do mean optional when we offer up optional. We recognize there's a lot of things going on that's competing for your time. But a couple of things, strategizing with your top schools and looking at that, and jotting down some ideas and thoughts as you're going through that process. I think a lot of students see this as an opportunity, and perhaps you have an older adult that is saying, you can, take an idea and reuse that, or take a paper and reuse that. And we would ask you, we would caution you on recycling. Themes, ideas can be recycled, whole entire papers. That's not actually what we value academically as educational institutions, but we're really looking for original bodies of works, thoughts, and ideas, and getting to know you as an individual. The paper that you wrote for a class may not translate well for a personal statement, and also may not be appropriate, and it may fall flat. So how do, in terms of the process itself, how do you go about developing these ideas? How do you go about moving the ideas into a body of work? Well, as Lisa and also Adam mentioned before, it's a reflective process, and it's a process of self-discovery. This doesn't happen overnight. It's not, boom, you have your personal essay all set. And we would say that if it happened overnight, it's probably not your best work. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about what's important to you, what drives you, what keeps you up at night for both good and bad reasons. There's typically no right or wrong answer, but you also need to recognize you have a limited runway with your personal statement or your essay. And so this is a platform for providing communicating an original body of work, your own experiences, your own thoughts, and also perspective. And again, it really needs to be your authentic self. And I'll talk a little bit more about the do's and don'ts in just a moment. But and as I mentioned before, with like any good body of writing, it takes time. However, we don't want you to obsess about this and constantly go back and just stare at your essay. Sometimes it just needs to breathe a little. Sometimes you need to step away from it and revisit it with a fresh set of eyes. And as I mentioned before, it just doesn't happen overnight. So some pearls of wisdom of do's and don'ts as you're going about this process. And as Lisa mentioned before, you're 17, 18 years old. We have all been 17 and 18 years old. We might be much older than that. And that's something to keep in mind, that we recognize, and you might be feeling the pressure to share something amazing, that you hiked, you summited Everest, that you figured out the cure for cancer, or whatever the case might be. We're expecting you to be a 17 and 18-year-old. And so please keep that in mind. And some of the best essays are just talking about everyday experiences, and not necessarily something that is mind-boggling. But in the first think small. As I mentioned before, you're limited in length. When you start with your introduction and then you have your conclusion, you really have a small runway. So there are certain topics that bode well for a personal statement. There are certain topics that you just do not have enough pages. And we're looking at a page and a half, maybe 2 pages beyond that. Save it for your autobiography. write about something that you're interested in, that you're passionate about. We can tell, we've read thousands upon thousands of essays, and we can tell if you're excited about that. It comes through in the tone itself. And showing is always important. Show. If it reads like a cookbook, then you're not showing enough. You're telling, you're giving us steps, and that doesn't help illustrate what makes you interesting and unique as an applicant, or makes you a three-dimensional individual. You're hearing us talk about authenticity, and I think one of the areas where you can be authentic, where it's important to get feedback and have someone edit along, you should edit, but others editing your essay. In the end, it should be your own voice, and it should not be the voice of your 40-year-old English teacher, or perhaps your 50-year-old uncle who is a professional writer. It should be your own voice, and it should sound like a 17 or 18-year-old. So as Lisa had mentioned, we're trying to get a sense of your passions, your interests, and we want you to be your authentic self. And so one of the things to avoid is to write what you think we're looking for. The age range of the admission committee can be anywhere from a 23-year-old to a 75-year-old professor. So please keep that in mind. And it's a really hard target to hit if you're thinking you're trying to hit what exactly we want to hear. We talk about the Ivy League try of using flowery language, or exaggerating, or going above and beyond kind of your own typical writing skills, or how you would communicate in writing. So please make sure it is on par with your own writing, and it seems to align, because this is one component of your application. Remember, we're getting letters of recommendation. We're seeing other areas of writing as well. Like academic papers, you're not going to submit your first draft. So you're going to look at this a few times. You're going to be working on it. It's not going to happen overnight. And I'll just finish up by saying, again, this process takes time. This is probably the part of the application we enjoy reviewing the most when we're reviewing applications. So please take your time, let it breathe, but also be mindful of deadlines. So Gloria, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing these important things to be thinking about as we approach the essay. And we always like to have a little bit of assignment or homework or takeaway with Tuesday Talks. And so some of these next steps is to go ahead and go in. I sent earlier in the chat the links for the Common App and Coalition essay prompts, and just write out some ideas. Don't write the thing, just find 2 or 3 prompts that really kind of resonate with you, and then write something. I think a lot of it in the beginning is to just get pen to paper, and or fingers to keyboard. We don't do pen to paper as much these days. But just think about like what elicits a response out of you. Like, and I think at the end of the day, when we talk about authenticity, it's so hard. We say that word all the time. We say authenticity and voice. I really kind of think like you got to come in and like which one resonates with you? Which one is like, oh, I have something to say. And that's what you start with the what I have something to say. We're gonna move into a time of questions. And as you're thinking about these next steps, you can, we've already seen some really great questions, and I'm going to start diving in there. But I'm going to start off with this question, Adam, Chandra, and Lisa. We're dealing with an audience that has a lot of opportunity for help, like agents or consultants or things like that. And so I just, that is a challenge with essays in particular, because a lot of people rely on these people to help them write. I mean, if not write, heavily edit. And I think we know that. I think the students and counselors on this call know that. You all know that. So I just want to start with that, because I know it's kind of a heavy topic, but I want to start with that. Like, how can we as a community help, schools, counselors combat like what's happening with this? How are you able to tell like when someone else writes the essay, like how should we approach this? Anyone want to take a first
Just
crack?
start. I mean, I think that authenticity is really important. Um, I think to Chandra's point about, recycling ideas and concepts and maybe structures, but not content, and sort of copy and pasting one essay to another format. That's really good advice, because I think you don't always have originality. You can have an idea and you expand on it in various kinds of platforms. So you might take the topic and write one way about it for one essay, but then write another way about it for another essay. That's still original and creative and is your own authentic work. It's just sort of a different way to frame the answer to a different question. But if students have writing that's over edited and or that is sort of highly formal or highly stylized in a way that looks like, multiple adults have kind of gone through it and taken out that 17-year-old voice. I do think for trained admissions officers, it's pretty easy to spot that. One of the, all three of us are pretty senior in our office. And so we oversee training and we oversee sort of working with our own staffs to make sure that they know how to read an application well, and also how to spot some things in the essays that may actually not speak to student originality or may not speak to truthfulness or authenticity. And so we do have ways of looking at that. But, at the end of the day, let me just say directly, if you choose to do this, you're cheating yourself more than anyone else. You are robbing yourself of the ability to communicate your own values and your own interests and your own passions in a way that speaks to the things you care about. So I would not advise it. And I think there's a line between comment and feedback, which you do want to get, and editing, rewriting, and removing voice, which is your voice, from the writing that you're submitting to colleges. And I think most people sort of know where that line is, but it is something that I think you have to take responsibility for when you are putting together your application.
And there is one question where someone is saying, a student is saying that their teacher said that you only read the first sentence. And so that first sentence is the most important. So can you touch on that? Like if I know you don't only read the first sentence, but maybe give a little color on what the review is like.
I could take that and feel free to add on, Chandra and Adam, but no, we don't read the first sentence and then move on. That would be a huge disservice to the applicant. We are reading the essay as a whole. So, we want to see what the theme is with the essay, right? It's like about 500 words, and we want to see how you're getting to the different topics that you're hoping to touch upon within that theme or within that, in that short writing. There's really, I don't know how to explain it, but just know we don't just read the first sentence and move on, because what have we been talking about here? We want to get to know you, right? We want to get to know the student. And it's basically impossible to tell somebody who you are in one sentence. Now, admissions officers try when it's like a 3-minute presentation and we're like, this is what our school is like. But as an applicant, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to do that. We are reading the essay. We are reading your supplemental writing because we certainly want to know who you are, because ultimately we are looking for reasons to admit students, and we're looking for students who really fit in our community and, are really people who will be good stewards of the education that we're providing. And so we would be doing a disservice to our own institutions as well as to the applicant if we did not focus enough attention on the essays.
I will also just add, for the InitialView writing sample, I'll give a sense of like, there have been times where people will, exactly what Sean was talking about earlier, recycling content, and they will recycle and just jam in a paragraph from something else they've written in the writing sample. And it's very obvious, even if you change the beginning and the end, there's this like middle piece that doesn't quite make sense or fit. And I think if we think about the essay that way too, or the whole application for that matter, if you try to jam in some things, it won't read cohesively. And so when, you know, whoever's asking this question about the first sentence, like, you definitely don't want to only focus on a first sentence, because it will become truncated and it will become not cohesive. And you do have multiple readers looking at this. It's not just one person who's, you know, speeding through your application. There's time taken and care taken. Despite the number of applicants that admissions officers have, there's time. There's time to look at it. And so that would just be my added little piece. Okay, so topics. I think there's a question about, you know, some students want to write about something really deep, and some people want to write something about like, that maybe seemingly is a little bit more shallow, but it's meaningful to them. So do you have any advice about what approach people should take, right? About the really, you know, the mountain, like the big struggle, or do you write about, you know, video games because that's what you love?
You're going to hear this time and time again from admissions of not giving it a definitive answer, but rather, well, that depends. And I think, as I had mentioned before, some topics are really hard to cover in a page and a half, 2 pages. And so as you're thinking about the deep, the heavy, please keep that in mind. And there might be an opportunity, if this is something that you need to share with the admission office and you feel that this is important, there might be another place for that, whether it's your college counselor reflecting upon it, whether it's a required or optional interview to share this information. But I would just share with you that with concise and cogent writing, some topics just don't lend well for exploring it fully. And it can come off sometimes as either very surfacey or shallow as a result of that. Again, we recognize there's 17 and 18-year-old students that are submitting that. So we do take that into context. But again, you don't necessarily have to get our attention with something that was traumatic or tragic for you. That can be, if that's something that's important, that can be highlighted in other areas of your application.
Yeah, I mean, my creative writing teacher in college said that, Adam, you should always read 5 words before you write one. So I think that one of the things that you should do as well is research the format. The essay is a format. It is a platform. It is a style of communication, and it is different from a report or a research paper. It is often a space for reflection and analysis and sort of critical thinking. But to Chandra's point, you have to find a topic that also lends itself well to that particular format. So you're not going to explain Einstein's theories very well in 400 words, is my guess, unless you're really succinct. But you may be able to tell a story about something that happened to you and reflect upon why it matters and what it means and how you think that event impacts your thinking about a topic or a way of seeing the world going forward. You know, and so I think that's part of it. My suggestion, and what I do still to this day, and I did a lot in college, I read a lot of op-eds. I read a lot of editorials in newspapers. I read a lot of sort of formatted writing that is 300 to 500 to 600 words long, so that I can understand how is someone taking the style of the college essay and using it to make a point that I can learn something about a topic with. And I think those are good examples. They're not all examples, because a lot of those topics tend to be in the social sciences, and we want topics that are, you know, very broad, not just in the social sciences. But think about that, because I do think that we're asking you to write in a particular way, not write about a particular thing. And that is a distinction.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reiterate something that Chandra said. We do not expect students to write about a traumatic experience. Like that is not what's going to get you admitted. And we don't want you to bring up any trauma or be forced to write about something that you don't feel comfortable writing about. So certainly do not expect that you have to have gone through, you know, death or any other type of traumatic experience in order to get into college. That is definitely not the case. And I do want to caution students against, thinking that they have to write about some traumatic experience in order to be a good applicant or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, the last few years, I can think of a handful of topics that I remember. I can't tell you the essay word for word, but one was about a student's relationship with a peach tree in their backyard that was planted by a great grandmother, I think, on the birthday of her son, who was his great grandfather, and the relationship with the tree to the family, to the house, to the generations of responsibility and care for nature. The student wanted to be an environmental science major, and I thought beautifully connected this relationship of nature and stewardship to family and personal story. Another great one was why my kid sister is my hero. And this student's kid sister, I do remember the student was from Texas. This student's kid sister had Down syndrome. And this student talked about why my 4-year-old sister is my hero. And it started out with, she doesn't wear a cape and she's only 4 years old, but I look up to her more than she knows. And it was essentially sort of a real celebration of family and of learning about how you celebrate difference and why that's important. And so these are not necessarily things that are unique to one person. I think lots of people have things that happen to them that are really powerful and motivating. The trick is to sort of find that thing that communicates those values and your experiences in a way that you can talk about in an essay.
I will just add, along with Adam's comments of, I recognize you're jotting down copious notes right now in terms of tips, and oh wow, that essay about the peach tree really resonated with Adam. I'm going to write about the apple tree, or it's not about that, but rather that worked for that particular student, and that worked for that student as part of a larger application. So it's one component, as Adam had pointed out earlier, that's a holistic admission process. So while the essay was memorable, there were other aspects of the application that were probably equally memorable in their different parts. So write that something that works for you and feels authentic to you. Again, we're going to go back to that authenticity, making sure it's your own body of work, that it sounds like you. But these are just ideas. These aren't necessarily themes that are going to get our attention and give you, bonus points or whatever the case might be, because we want to hear your own personal voice.
That brings me to the topic of like cohesion. Like how does it all come together? Because it's not just the essay, it's the essay in the context of the entire application. So do you have thoughts or tips on, because I know like sometimes students are worried about things connecting. And so in the hope of connecting everything, they might say the same thing multiple times. And so do you have any suggestions and tips about that? Like, should you be saying like, and one of you mentioned the doctor example of like, and that is why I want to be a doctor. Like that's an example. Like, is that something you should be doing where like every supplement, every essay, every interview, you should like hit something on the head so that it ties? Or is that like too contrived?
I'll take a first swing and then open it up for Lisa and Adam to share their insights. But I think one of the trends tends to be with the personal statement of shoving every single point into one body of work where it doesn't is not cohesive by any means, but rather sounds like an academic essay, sounds like a personal statement, and almost sounds like a justification of all the activities that you've done and why you've done them. And it just doesn't necessarily read really well, but also going back to the holistic approach, this is one component of the application. So there's many different areas of real estate to touch upon things that are important to you. And we recognize you're complex individuals with different interests, and we're looking for that, and that is fine. So you don't necessarily need to keep hitting upon that you're big on social justice, you do this, and then add it to your essay, because I think there's probably other aspects that are quite interesting that you're not telling us about in the essay. So in terms of the cohesive, I'll go back and say the cohesive nature of the entire application, not just the personal statement, is looking at your entire application from your activities and how they're listed and how they're described, to your short answers, to your body of work for your personal statement. You're not going to see your letters of recommendation. In most cases, you're not going to see your letters of recommendation. You know what your transcript looks like. So the other pieces are either you know about them or they're beyond your control, but you have a general sense of how they're going to reflect upon you. So I would say looking at how you're presenting self on your part of the application is helpful.
Yeah, I think one of our do's is to think small. So you certainly do not have to reiterate your entire activities list. In fact, please don't, because we already saw it on your activities list. So, you know, like Adam said, some of the smallest topics can be the most impactful essays, and they're certainly not going to be essays that are like, you know, changing the world, or you're not changing the world with your essay or whatever. But, you know, if it's important to you, if it's something that you are able to really show us how that connects to your personality, how that connects to some of your values, you know, that would be a great essay. And it doesn't even need to connect necessarily to other parts of your application, because this is something that you're trying to tell us that maybe we wouldn't be able to see in other parts of your application, right? Because we see your extracurricular list. You probably have a sense of what your counselor might write about you from conversations, hopefully conversations with your counselor. And so, you know, your essay might be a place where you're like, well, you haven't seen this side of me. Like, this is something that's also really important. And that is certainly a space for you to be able to expand upon those ideas.
Adam, did you have anything else to add? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I think my colleagues covered that very comprehensive.
Wonderful. Okay. You all mentioned you don't need to mention your extracurricular activities in your essay. Is that because of the 150 characters already that you're getting on that? Or is there ever a case where it does make sense to talk about an extracurricular activity in your essay?
Yeah, I think there can be cases where that makes sense. I mean, one of the things that I think you should always be thinking about as you're what I would call layering on the various parts of your application, because that's really what it is. You're sort of building it by layers. I mean, that's sort of the idea of holistic review, is we're sort of peeling back the layers and trying to understand you a little bit. That's why we ask for more things, honestly, than a lot of other universities, international for sure, but even in the United States. It does take a little bit more effort. You have to submit a little bit more information to colleges and universities like ours. And the reason is because we're trying to get this broader perspective. So if you're going to choose an extracurricular activity, you might want to think about answering a different question. So in my previous life, I was a journalist, and the world is dominated by who, what, when, where, why, and how. And those are the questions every journalist should have in their back pocket when they do an interview. If you're only answering the how questions throughout your interview, you're missing out. If you're only answering the who questions throughout your interview, you're missing out. The application should try to answer all of those: who, what, when, where, why, and how. So spend some time thinking not just about the topic, but how you frame the direction of what you're communicating about the topic using those guiding words. So it could be that your activities list is a lot of what and a lot of who. and that your essay on a particular activity is a lot of why. And that would be a good way to think about, well, it's the same thing in terms of topic, but it's a different perspective. And so it adds value and it adds layers. And in our world, when we talk about this, what we're really saying is it adds meaning. And meaning is what we're trying to sort of get at the heart at as we're thinking about evaluation.
Great. There is a question about cliches. And so do you have any thoughts on what not to do when it comes to cliche, or what is seemingly like a cliche to you all?
So I think there are certain topics that people think are cliches, but if it's important to you, definitely talk about it. I think when we say avoid cliches, it's more like cliche language. Common colloquialisms or something that people use all the time. I can't think of any right off the top of my head right now, actually. But it kind of goes back to the idea of you don't have to be unique in your application to be, a valid applicant, an applicant that we're interested in. So if a topic is of importance to you, but you're worried that other people maybe are writing about it as well, don't worry about other people. Just worry about what it is that you're hoping to write and what that means to you, what that topic means to you. But maybe avoid the thesaurus. I can't even say the word. Avoid the thesaurus a little bit when you're writing, because again, authenticity, we know you certainly don't use all of these words that are 10 letters long. But a topic wouldn't necessarily be cliche, but maybe how you write it could be cliche.
Great. Yeah, I would say, avoid buzzwords just for the sake of having them. That I think that sometimes people do that just because they think that that's like a trendy thing. But if it's not something that's actually important to you, you shouldn't write it. Great. Well, I want to be mindful of our time. So is there anything like parting words of wisdom that you might want to give as you've seen the questions that have come in and based on our discussion? No parting words.
Sure. I think we, should give you something. I think, this is really also, we've talked a lot about essays, but just to kind of raise it a little bit, you are engaging in something that may make you feel vulnerable, that may make you feel like you're sort of giving information out there to people that you don't know, that you don't normally talk to. And so it begs the question of, do you trust the process, and do you trust those around you and those and yourself as you're communicating this? And so I would just say that doing this process well, going through this process well, does require you to need others. You need a community of supporters. You need teachers and counselors. You need people around you who can support you. Maybe that comes in the form of being a verbal cheerleader. They can't really help you with anything, but they love you and they want to support you. Maybe that comes in the form of someone actually looking over an essay or talking with you about a subject before you start writing about it, just so you can kind of get your thoughts out and verbalize them before you put them down on paper. And so my sort of big picture advice is be kind to the people around you. You don't know where folks are coming from, what kind of day they've had, what kind of week they've had. People are actually really excited to see you go to college, see you go to university. Nobody wants you to succeed more than the people in your circles and in your schools and who are supporting you. So kindness goes a long way in making sure you form those community bonds. And you should just kind of remember that because if anything, there's going to be a moment when there's anxiety and stress and pressure. And sometimes that can cause us to get short-tempered or get frustrated or kind of say things in the heat of the moment. Just resist that. Just smile through it. just be kind and say, that's okay. I appreciate you. Because I think those are the times when, as we go through this process, at the end of it, you're going to look back at those moments and you're going to be like, yeah, I am good. I am ready to go to college. I feel good about this. I feel empowered. I feel supported. And that is going to make you a much, much better college student. You're going to succeed. You're going to thrive. You're going to be a lot more self-empowered. And that's really key to your success in college as you move through.
Thank you, Adam. And I just want to add, like we are really stressed in this process, but really what you want is to have a really good college experience. And so if you're trying really hard to write something that's not about you, and then the school reads it thinking you're somebody else, then you get to school and then it's not the right fit, it's not going to be great. So really when you think about, I know lots of questions here, like, I don't know how to decide what to write, like really just go back deep in like what's going to make you excited and successful in the future. Like, don't think so much about the process of getting in, but think about what you want to enjoy in your wonderful future ahead. So I'll leave with that. I know there's so many more things that people want to say. If you want to know about these institutions specifically, if you have questions that were not answered, please reach out. These colleagues would love to connect with you. And as always, we have this recorded. We have more Tuesday talks coming. These topics we continue to talk about. And so if the question didn't get answered, it will get answered somehow. Thank you again for joining us for Tuesday Talks. We will take a break next week because of holidays for some people, but then we will be back the following week and talk about women's colleges. So enjoy your week, enjoy your evening, your afternoon, your morning, wherever you are. Have a good night, day. Bye.